Welcome back to Guardians of Gaia, connecting people and planet. In our episode today, we've been looking at the gendered nature of climate change, discovering the impacts of environmental crisis on women and girls. We've been discussing what urgently is needed in South Africa for gender and environmental justice. The relationship between women's social labor, the environment and climate change is illustrated through women's relationships to water and land. Let's hear what Trisha Reddy from Women had to say.
Women often, even though they're the ones who are the stewards of our land and resources in South Africa, where traditional leaders, who are usually men, are the ones who actually own the land in many areas, even though women are the ones who actually work, which is not just for themselves, but for their entire communities. And because of the issue of land ownership, we find that women end up being disenfranchised, particularly when there's climate impacts and so on. And so we need to deal with the issue of land ownership when we deal with the issue of a just transition. How do we share land? And how do we ensure that women who are the ones who are mostly stewards of the land be equal owners of the land, and it's community ownership rather than ownership by certain private individuals, which is the state of capitalism today, but rather it is owned by women and their whole communities as well. And so that gives them a better sense of control, a better sense of ownership, a better sense of voice when we are transitioning into more sustainable lives and more sustainable livelihoods. I think it is really important for us to ensure that as we build responses and real responses to the climate and ecological crisis, that we have to be feminist in our responses as well. We have to consider that this is about demolishing and abandoning all kinds of oppression on people, all kinds of domination. So it's domination of people over the planet, it's domination over men, over women, it's domination of all kinds that we act of race, for example, of white over black, of class, of rich over poor. And so it's really about dealing with those systems of oppression and domination as we try and address the climate and ecological crisis. If we don't actually do that, if we don't address those systems of domination and oppression, like I said, even of people who think that they are that they should be dominating nature, then we will never be able to actually deal with the climate and ecological crisis. So my message really is about all of this. It's really about addressing the root causes of the climate crisis, about taking over and the corporate capture of the climate negotiations, about making sure that women and their communities' voices are actually heard in terms of providing and leading on real solutions to the climate crisis, like peasant agroecology, for example, and starting to talk about and ensuring that we start making sure that we have actual real viable alternatives to this destructive development model that we are in at the moment.
When women are empowered, there are social and economic benefits for them, their household and communities.
This is my farm. I'm gonna show you where I planted my seeds. The seeds, which is our inheritance. It is our pride, it is our life, it is what we depend on. This is where I planted my maize, pumpkins, some beans as well. In this field, I've never applied any chemical. No fertilizer, no herbicide is used. and no hybrid has been used in this. I know our governments give us some inputs, but that creates dependency as well at a certain stage. So we are trying to run away from that. Now, I want to show you the wealth of our culture, the biodiversity, the richness of the seeds that we have. The role of the government is to recognize all our indigenous seeds. They need to be protected. I'm gonna show you my seeds. The seeds which are rich in nutrition. And I'm gonna show you these 3 varieties of cereals which can be an alternative to maize. You can use them in any soils. They are early maturity crops. Then this was passed on by my in-law. This has been planted year in, year out for generations. And we also have cucumbers, local cucumbers, which has been planted for generations as well. It's all indigenous and the fertility is so natural. We are doing this because I know if you produce the food using natural seeds, natural fertility, crops will be very healthy. So that is why I, in the community, promote this so that we do not rely on anyone. The culture is very important. So whatever we have as seed, whatever we have we are using or whatever we are consuming should be passed on to the next generation. So whatever I have, I urge my children to keep on using it because it's very important. It will reduce dependency, to improve the nutrition, and it will keep their culture, their identity as well.
You're watching Guardians of Gaia, connecting people and planet as we explore climate change as a gender issue. We've seen the evidence and experience showing that gender justice is interconnected to climate justice. This past month, environmental justice organizations protested on issues related to South Africa's stance to climate change and our energy future, ignoring the Climate Justice Charter submitted to Parliament. Let's hear more about the Climate Justice Charter and watch the action that took place.
So let me just speak of the goals of the Climate Justice Charter. So the first one is to advance an awareness that we thrive and we coexist on one planet. To break away from this idea that humans are above nature, that we are part and we are central of it. To inspire a breakaway with the thinking that caused the climate crisis and the thinking that reinforces the obsession with growth, with domination of nature and so on and so forth. Our goal is to reconnect an earth-centered conception of what it means to be human, to deepen cooperation amongst ourselves, to overcome the crisis of the corporate captured leadership, and to strengthen our democracy. So those are the goals of the Climate Justice Charter. But beyond that, the Charter is principles for a deep and a just transition in society, as well as systemic alternatives for transformative change. So it's a vision document that we took to Parliament last year, which unfortunately Parliament has not given a hearing on the floor. But we are going back on the 9th of November this year to ask why they have not adopted the climate justice chart.
Africa Energy Week at the waterfront last week, primarily to bring voices of people who are resisting dirty fossil fuel energy projects across Africa to this very exclusive and expensive $1,500 ticket conference, to say to them that yes, there were people on the ground in Cape Town protesting their oil and gas agenda, but also bringing voices from across the continent, from communities and groups across the continent who are protesting these dirty energy projects and saying that, you know, what we need for Africa is a renewable energy revolution.
Extinction Rebellion, one of the key demands is to tell the truth. And really what we find big oil and gas companies doing is not telling the truth. They constantly are co-opting terms like just transition and changing it to suit what they want, and that is their profits. And so, for instance, even for Africa Energy Week, it used to be called Africa Oil Week. Now oil's become something that isn't that fashionable anymore. And so it's been switched to Africa Energy Week. Just transition is now the energy transition in their terms, which means more oil and more gas.
We need to show much more dedication and commitment into the urgency of the emergency, phasing out fossil fuels. We don't need any more false solutions that will be given to us, or climate discussions just for the sake of having discussions. We need to really start to implement the transition as fast as possible, and also bringing along those who are working in the fossil fuel industries to form part of this just transition to implement renewables as soon as possible.
Thanks for joining us as we explored how climate change is a gender issue and how we can unite in solidarity for social and environmental justice. Climate change action is as much about protecting the planet as it is about justice and equality for its people. Thanks for joining us, and please do join us again next week as we explore the environmental world and learn how people are working to save our planet and fight the system that is killing it.
Don't leave the tap dripping, don't leave the tap dripping, don't leave the tap dripping, dripping, dripping.